When I awoke, submerged in the convalescence tank at the POW hospital, I thought I was still in the ocean. I started kicking and flailing. My mechanical arm pulled free of the restraints with a loud underwater snap. Bubbles pouring out of either side of the oxygen mask obscured my vision, but then I saw people in uniforms and lab coats, blurry but visible through the liquid and glass, and I relaxed a bit, but it was too late. They'd already injected the IVs with tranquilizer. My limbs went from mildly numb to feeling like they were wrapped in 4 feet of soaked wool. A few seconds later, I fell back to sleep. I remember. I dreamt I was a lumberjack competing in the Lumberjack Olympics. I had to run across a bunch of logs, each flush against the next, and all of them rolling, though not in unison, across a river. That Creedence song about rolling on a river, it was playing over a PA. It was the Lumberjack Olympics theme song. Callie was on the other side of the river, cheering me on, but as I stepped from log to log, I realized they weren't really logs at all. They were sharks. My leg slipped down between two sharks, and I drew back a stump and started to fall into them when I woke up again, floating straight up and down in what I somehow understood to be an antiseptic solution tank. There were tubes coming in and out of my body, an oxygen mask sealed to my face and goggles, not the tight pink kind, but rather an industrial medical kind, sealed around my eyes. The pantyhose were gone, but I must have had enough thread crisscrossing my skin to knit another 2 pairs. I had 3,677 stitches, a new world record, and that's not counting the staples stumping my leg shut just below the knee. Later on, the Aussie doctors would explain how I wouldn't have survived had a passing patrol boat not spotted some poor cunt swimming through a smorgasbord. That's a quote from the newspaper. Some poor cunt. These were colorful guys, my rescuers. They described the water as boiling when they arrived on the scene. The water was boiling, and there I was, some poor cunt floating on top. When they managed to drag me into their boat, my skin was hanging everywhere in flaps. Some fishermen would later retrieve the leg from the belly of a 19-foot great white. Its stomach also contained a license plate, a turtle shell, and a bunch of half-digested, happy, smiling fishes. I sort of felt bad for the turtle and the owner of that license plate. Oh, and they found one other thing in that 19-foot monster's stomach. A mysterious piece of plastic with the letters OK written in the classic scrolling style of the Coca-Cola Company. I like to think that was from the front of a vending machine. Those first few weeks of consciousness in the convalescence tanks crawled by like the last few minutes of high school with a clock in plain sight. The same thought kept going through my mind. How in the hell am I going to find Callie now? Minus a leg, locked in a POW hospital? How? Almost no one spoke to me. Not in the tank, as it wasn't equipped for sound. That low, underwater, blood pumping through the ears noise remained my only audible companion. Once in a while, a doctor or nurse or someone would write something on a piece of paper and hold it up to the glass. These were yes or no questions. Are you American? Are you a combatant? Are you Clay Ingram of Chicago? Then one morning I woke up and they'd replaced my oxygen mask and goggles with a full helmet thing. It had a microphone and headphones so they could ask me more detailed questions. I told them whatever they wanted to know. Fair dinkum. I only lied about Callie's real name and Captain Mustarian's involvement. Callie I called Carrie. And no matter how many times they asked me if I was something called a poofter, the pink goggles, I told them, were mine. When my wounds healed enough to let me out, they wrapped my entire body in bandages and laid me in a bed enveloped in a bubble. My mechanical arm sustained cosmetic damage, but that was all. Shark teeth had punctured my lungs, but no major organs, except my kidneys, and I had 2 of those, so I figured no big deal. The only broken bone was my shin bone, the one some shark had swallowed along with the rest of my lower leg. The doctors assured me that doctors in the States would equip me with a robotic one just as soon as the Aussies shipped me back. To be fair, all my doctors in the POW hospital turned out to be decent guys. They fixed me up like one of their own, except for the robotic leg I needed. They did fit me with a remedial prosthetic that, with practice, allowed me to get out of bed and limp around the hospital, like if I needed to go to the bathroom or get something from a vending machine, which was as far as I could go, since they couldn't release me or let me return to the States until the war was over. There was no way around that, the doctors explained as nicely as they could. Not that it helped my spirit any. I didn't even want to go home, I told them. I begged them to let me search Sydney with an armed guard or whatever they required. I told them who I was, that I was the guy who discovered Zanadium in the first place. Never mind Rayner or the dead Burkanabes. It was me. I did it. I found the element that might save the world. Couldn't they make an exception for a savior? But their answer was no, not while we're at war. I'd never find Callie now, I thought. I was certain. And I was right. Callie would find me. The first time someone brought me a newspaper, it didn't have anything to do with the war or to help me reconnect with the rest of the world. It was to get my autograph. That front page I'll never forget. Cross-dressing Yank cyborg swims from Antarctica to Sydney for lover. Of course, that was a ridiculous exaggeration, even by Aussie standards. Plus, they weren't trying to be funny, that was just the Australian press for you. Or at least the Australian press under the Continental Party and its Prime Minister. Even the more accurate depictions in other papers had me using my mechanical arm to punch sharks unconscious or punch my way out of a shark's belly. They'd fabricated photographs too, all of which Callie would later tell me she'd loved. This news never made headlines in the US, but my little swim made me a minor celebrity in the Australian tabloids, which was all that mattered, seeing as how Callie had been working undercover as a photographer for a Queensland tabloid, pretending to be an Indian national and using the tabloid's cameras and equipment to snap illegal pictures of small tactical nuke testing, which she planned to bring back to the States. Kaboom! Australia may not have had Zanadium, but they did have 40% of the world's uranium supply, and by God, the Continental Party planned to use it. The 7 nations figured the US would use a Zanadium bomb sooner or later. Afterwards, the entire surrounding area, including Antarctica, would be too radioactive to visit for another 60 years, which might as well have been forever. Not to mention, it would have devastated Australia's main source of revenue, which was, of course, tourism. And so Australia had set to work to perfect their own strategic nuclear capabilities. They tried their hardest to combine neutron laser drill technology with uranium bomb manufacturing to create a weapon that would kill all living things but not destroy buildings or equipment or render the area uninhabitable for too long. A bomb with a safe list. To make matters worse, the Aussies would have interpreted any sign of U.S. retreat as a precursor to a U.S. Zanadium attack. Looking back, it was as though everyone had their fingers poised over triggers. Presidents and prime ministers had their fingers on nuclear triggers. Callie had her finger on a camera clicker. I had my finger on the self-administration button hooked up to my Demerol drip. Every 90 seconds, I could press that Demerol self-administration button to release Demerol, my first love painkiller, into my bloodstream. The button only allowed this every 90 seconds so that I wouldn't overdose. To this day, I can tell you when 90 seconds have passed without counting in my head. By the time Callie showed up, I must have been pressing that button every 90 seconds in my sleep. No exaggeration. It's also no exaggeration to say that when war rumors first surfaced, Callie boarded the next plane to Australia, before American citizens were banned, purchased a fake Indian passport in Adelaide, used her portfolio to get a job at a tabloid in Queensland, and created a chance to get her photos published back in the U.S. through the dean of RBG, the university in New York that had rejected her application, because she was too good. Had she succeeded in mailing the dean those photographs of Australian nukes, they would have been the first images sent back from the enemy's staging grounds. They would have made Callie Davidson a household name. They also would have put her on Australia's most wanted list, but that was never the sort of thing Callie considered. Fatal decisions and such. Or fear. Callie only saw how those photos could have opened doors all around the world for her work. Never mind that her work would be circling the globe without her, except maybe for a little picture of her right before she died in a hailstorm of Aussie bullets. But instead, Callie saw me on the front page of an Australian tabloid. And so Callie got a metal bucket, burned all her incriminating photos, destroyed the digital memory cards with a hammer, and, after erasing her laptop's hard drive, chucked it into the ocean. She took pictures of all the stuff she destroyed, too. Pictures which would go on, as a series, to become Callie's second most famous work after the picture that would eventually win her the Pulitzer Prize. Then Callie surrendered, as an illegal alien at a POW hospital, asking only to see me.